All right, Rabbi, say good morning. Good morning. Let us begin by thanking all of our sponsors for this morning. Share to thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Kislev. Josh and Becca Friedman for dedicating all the Shuman Joshos this month in commemoration of the yahrzeit of Josh's father, Yisrael Yehuda ben Rav Chaim Rafael, as well as for an aliyah for the neshamos of those who were murdered al Kiddush Hashem on Shmini Atzeres, for a safe return of all of our chayalim and hostages, and refuah shalema for all those who have been injured. Sammy and Malka Esterson in memory of their parents, Hinda Bas Henach Ephraim, Yitzchak Leib ben Aaron HaKohen, Sarah Rachel Bas Baruch Avram Zichronim Livracha. The Pepper family in memory of their brother and uncle, Yosef Pepper, Yosef David ben Yaakov Zichronim Livracha. Our week of learning sponsors, Dr. Ed and Faith Wolf, in honor of the marriage of their son Gideon to Mali Himorich, Mazel Tov, may the Chassid and Kala Bizocha to build the Bais Neman B'Yisrael. Dan and Rissel Edelman and Adam and Fran Edelman, L'Zecher Nishmas, our day of learning sponsors, L'Zecher Nishmas, Uriah ben David, Uriah Mash, Hashem Yikom Damo, 42 years old, from the Yeshuv of Neria, and an armored fighter in the 52nd Battalion, 401st Brigade, fell in the battle in the northern Gaza Strip. Uriah was 42 years old and left behind his wife Avital and 6 beautiful children, ages 1 through 14. May Avinu Shabbat Shamayim grant a nechama to the Mash family. May they know no more sorrow, and Meretz Hashem. All of the neshamas should have an aliyah, all of the families a nechama, and all those who need a refuah should have one together with Kol Cholei Yisrael. Incredible. All right, I will say with that, let us begin. We have a lot to do today, Baruch Hashem. So our daf, and we dedicate all of Maseches Baba Kamma, the Ilui Nishmas, Master Sergeant Eliyahu Michal Charush, Hashem Yikom Damo, in the merit of our Talmud Torah. May his neshama have an aliyah and the family a nechama. Well, so with that, let us begin. Today's daf is Yotes 19. A lot of really interesting concepts in today's daf. We are picking up on Yud Chesed Beis 18b, and we are picking up Gufa by Rava. It is 5 lines up from before the lines get wide. So we actually referenced this idea in yesterday's daf. So the Gemara says as follows. The Gemara says Gufa, boy Rava, Yesha Ad L'Tzros and Ad L'Tzros. Can you become a muad for tzroros or not? So says we've already established that halacha l'maisa, tzroros pays chatzin nezek, in accordance with the opinion of the Rabbanon. That is the halacha l'Moshe Misinai. We also established in yesterday's daf that tzroros pays not migufo, the tzroros damages are not capped at the value of the damaging animal. Rather, for tzroros, one pays min ha'aliyah, from the best property, like other forms of damage, like other forms of regal. Now the question is, can an animal become muad for tzroros? Such a concept like this. Now, what will be the ramification of becoming muad for tzroros? So maybe even for tzroros, after you become a muad, maybe you pay nezek shalim. Maybe nezek shalim. So that's an interesting shaila. So the Gemara says, on one hand, like Karen medamin alei. So on one hand, do we say that chatzi nezek is like Karen? Because remember again, Karen tam is the only other situation where you have half damages. So do we say on one hand that chatzi nezek is like Karen? O Dilma, and therefore again, you can become muad. O Dilma tolda de regalu, or maybe no, it's a tolda of regel. And I will say, as a tolda of regel, what do we say? As a tolda of regel, halacha lemaisa, regel is muad from the beginning. So too, maybe we say tzroros is muad from the beginning. Just the muad of tzroros never evolves into nezek shalim. The muad of tzroros remains at chatzi nezek. So we'll say that's the shaila. So Tashma. Hidos in a muad. So this before. So we learned yesterday's daf that hidos, hopping for a chicken, is not muad. The yeshum harei muad, and others say it is muad. So Gemara says hidos for hopping for a chicken is obviously common behavior. So how can you figure out having a question whether or not hidos is muad? Ela hidos vehitis. Rather, what we must be talking about is the case where the chicken is hopping, and through its hopping, it's kicked up some pebbles. So we'll say, my lav kigon da'avat tlasa zimni. Are we not talking about a case where the chicken hopped and kicked up pebbles, caused damage, and did this 3 times? 3 times. And therefore, we'll say, what's the machlokes about? Come in for the first wide line, mar savra yesha ada, or mar savra ina ada. Maybe the machlokes will say is there muad for tzroros or not? That's the Shaila. To which the Gemara says, no, that's not the discussion. Lo, bechadazimna. No, we're talking about where it hopped and kicked up pebbles one time. So what's the machlokes? Ubeplukta the sumchos v'rabanan kamiflagi. The machlokes is the good old machlokes by tzroros. The machlokes of sumchos and rabbanan. Sumchos holding that tzroros is nezek shalim, and rabbanan holding that it is chatzi nezek. Okay, Tashma. So we'll say, so still no resolution to our question. Tashma. Another case. It's an interesting case. An animal defecated in dough. Right? Animal defecated in dough. So what's the halacha? Rabbi Yehuda Omer Meshalim Nezek Shalim. Rabbi Yehuda says complete damages. Rabbi Elazar Omer Chatzi Nezek. Rabbi Elazar says half damages. My love kigon da'ava tlasa zimni. Are we not talking about a case where the animal did this 3 times? Ubahaka meflagi. And what are they arguing about? Mar sara yesha ada, umar sara ein ha'ada. What's the machlokes? The machlokes is, can an animal become muad for tzroros? I will say it's actually interesting. The Gemara is looking at waste as tzroros. That's how it's looking at it. So in other words, the animal relieves itself on the dough, so therefore that's a case of tzroros. And again, in machlokes, do you pay chatzi nezek or nezek shalim? So the Gemara says, maybe we're talking about a case where the animal relieved itself. This is the 3rd time the animal did it, 4th time the animal did it. And the shaila is, do we say that an animal becomes muad for tzroros or not? To which the Gemara says, lo, that's not the machlokes, bechad zimna. This is actually talking about where the animal did this the 1st time. So what's the machlokes? Ubeplukta the sumchos v'rabanan kamiflagi. They will say this machlokes, again, is the same good old machlokes of tzroros. And again, sumchos holds nezek shalim for tzroros, and the rabbanan hold chatzi nezek for tzroros. The Gemara says, v'hamishunahu. Now, what's it saying? An animal defecating on dough is not a normal occurrence. That's not normally what animals do. So I will say it's mishuna. If something is mishuna, so then what does it become essentially? It becomes keren. Remember again, keren rabosai is any abnormal aggressive behavior. But the truth is, like broadened keren is really what we'll call any abnormal damaging behavior. So therefore, an animal defecating on dough would seem to be a case of keren. Now, if it's a case of keren tam, how much do you pay for keren tam? How much for keren tam? Chatzi nezek. So what's the svara say nezek shalim? To which the Gemara says, no, the dachik le alma. We're talking about a case where the animal was constrained in space, therefore it didn't have the ability to move around. Because it didn't have the ability to move around, therefore it really has no choice but to go ahead and relieve itself here, in which case it's a situation of regal. Right? It's a situation of regal. The Dachigli Alma. Valem Rav Yehuda, or but it could possibly be Shane also. Okay, Valem Rav Yehuda, Halacha Kesumros. Valem Rabbi Elazar, Halacha Kerabanan. So we'll say, if that's the case, then just let Rav Yehuda say the Halacha is like Sumchos, namely Nezek Shalem, and let Rabbi Elazar say the Halacha is like Trabanan, Chasi Nezek. What are you getting into all this? The Gemara says, Gelalim, it's Trichale. No. But we'll say, even though it turns out that this is a classic case of Tzroros, we actually needed to express this case in the context of the animal relieving itself. Why? This is actually very interesting. It's Sachalait Chamina, Hoel Ubasar Gufei Guriran, Ki Gufei Dami. This is actually interesting. I would have actually thought that the case of Gilalim, the case of the animal defecating and relieving itself on the dough, I would have thought that the way we look at waste is a direct extension of the body of the animal. And therefore, this is not a case of tzroros at all. Rather, what is this? This is a case of the animal damaging the dough with his body itself. And we'll say if the animal is causing damage with the body, what is that called? Well, it could be, depending on the circumstances, it could be either keren, or it could be regel, or it could be shame. But it's not tzroros. Kamash Malan, the Gemara says, it is tzroros. So we'll say it's actually a really interesting idea that again, that waste itself, right, when the animal defecates on the dough, but it could be defecate to urinate, it doesn't matter, right? The manner of waste is not really so relevant. What matters over here is that the animal is relieving itself on the dough, which at first we thought was abnormal. Now it turns out because of the circumstances it is normal. You might have thought that waste is the actual extension of the body of the animal itself, and therefore it's considered as if the animal did damage with its body. Kamash Malon, that waste is tzroros. Fascinating. Who would have thought? Says the Gemara, Tashma, another interesting case. We'll say Tashma. The Tani Rai Bai Cheskel. Tarnagol Shahoshit Roshola Aver Kalischus. Listen to this. You have a chicken that sticks its head into a glass utensil, vitaka bavashavro, and the chicken begins to, or I guess like the rooster begins to crow, right? And it breaks the utensil with its sound, with its crowing. Okay, so what's the halacha? Mishalim nezek shalim. You pay complete damages. Complete damages. Rav Yosef, Rav Beirav. Similarly, sus shetzanav v'chamer shenar v'shivra sakelim mishalim chatzin nezek. Yet Rav Yosef said in the name of Rav or Beirav that if a horse brays, same case, right? A horse or a donkey sticks its head, or even if it doesn't stick its head, but it goes down and it brays or it neighs with such intensity that it breaks a utensil, what's the halacha? You pay half damages. You pay half damages. So what's going on? So we'll say, so machlokes, if an animal causes damage with its voice, is it nezek shalim or is it chatzi nezek? What's the machlokes over here? What's the machlokes? My love. So we'll say, so bepashtos, by the way, we're assuming that damage done with the voice is tzroros. Tzroros. Because remember, I will say, how did we define in Sunday's daf? How did we define tzroros? Tzroros is any damage done with force generated by the body, but not with the body itself. Right? So again, it's force generated by the body, but not with the body itself. So therefore, again, if the animal is causing damage with its voice, bepashtos, that's tzroros. And what do you see over here? What you have over here, I will say, is a case of where one opinion is saying chatzi nezek, and one opinion is saying nezek shalim. So what's the machlokes? My lav the avit zimni. Are we not talking about a case where the animal performed this act 3 times? Top of your test 19a. Ubahakam iflagi. And I will say, here's the machlokes. Mar savar yesha'ada. One opinion says you could become muad for tzvaros. Umar savar ein ha'ada. And one opinion says you don't become muad for tzvaros. Interesting. To which the Gemara says, lo, that's actually not the machlokes. Lo bechadzim no plukta the sumchos. That's actually not the case. The case is where this animal is a first-time offender. So what's the machlokes? The classic machlokes tzroros. Classic machlokes sumchos and Rabbanon. Sumchos holds nezek shalim. Rabbanon holds chatzi nezek. The Gemara is supposed to say your testimony 19a, third line down from the top. V'hamishunahu. But I will say, but one second. Remember, I will say it's important to understand tzroros, as it stands now, tzroros is really a derivative of regal. Right? That's the way the Rambam framed it. We're actually going to see today, can you have tzroros of Karen? We'll talk about that. But bepashtos, right? So that tzroros is a derivative of regal, which means, what's regal? Let's define, right? Use our terms with regal. Damage done during the commission of the activities of daily living, right? The Gemara says an animal sticking its head in a utensil, right? Crowing, braying, neighing, whatever it's doing, that's mishuna. That's abnormal. Well, abnormal damage is called what? Abnormal damage is Karen. So the Gemara says this is not tzroros case. So I don't understand why we even talking about tzroros and regal. This is Karen. Which the Gemara says no. The is bei bizrani. We'll say what's the case? There were seeds inside of the utensil. There was food. Someone placed food in the utensil. So we'll say at the end of the day, if someone places food in the utensil, then what? It's common for the animal to put its head in there to get the food. Once it puts its head in there, then ultimately again it would be common for it to crow, bray, or neigh. So therefore, again, I will say this is in fact a case of regular tzroros and not a case of Karen. Take a quick look at Rashi. Top line of Rashi. The Shadile Bizrani. Rashi says, Sheyesh Zroim Bikli. There are seeds in the utensil. The Archi Lahachnis Rosho B'Socho V'Lechol. Therefore, it's common for the animal to put its head in there and to eat. The Chevan the Archi Lechol Archi Nami Litzok. And once it's common for the animal to put its head in there, it's also common for it to crow, bray, and neigh. Good. So we'll say it's a very interesting case. Next. But again, doesn't help us, right? So I will say, so bottom line, at the end of the day, can you become a muad for tzroros or not? So I will say, so in other words, if an animal committed an act of tzroros 3 times, by the time we get to episode number 4, does the animal pay nezek shalim or not? So interestingly enough, the way we paskin, this is the Rambam, Hilchos Niskei Mamon, Perek Beis, Halacha Beis. At the end of the day, tzroros does not become muad. In other words, you could become a habitual offender for tzroros, but damages doesn't change. You're always going to pay chatzi nezek. That's the halacha. That's the Rambam Paskins, beis, hilchos niskei mammon. Okay, let's go weiter. Another question. Very interesting case here. Excuse me. By Rav Ashi, yesh shinui litzroros l'revia nezek o ein shinui litzroros l'revia. Sorry, l'revia. L'revia nezek. Yeah, one more time. By Rav Ashi, yesh shinui tzroros l'revia nezek o ein shinui tzroros l'revia nezek. So Rabbi say this is an interesting case. Take a look at Rashi here for just a moment. Yesh shinui litzroros l'revia nezek. So Rashi says l'rabanan de pligi asumchos v'amit tzroros ki archei chatzi nezek. So we'll say, now remember, going with the position of the Rabbanon, that tzroros is chatzi nezek, right? That tzroros is going to be half damages. So here's the shaila. Look what Rashi says. First short line in Rashi. Hecha deshina bahan kigon ba'ata beragla umachmas biot hetiza tzroros v'shabra kelim mi chashiv shinoi v'habi kitam u'mishalem revia nezek. Listen to this interesting shaila. So we'll say, we said before, general, tzroros is a derivative of regel, right? What's the paradigmatic case of tzroros? Animals walking, minding its own business, kicks up pebbles, pebbles do damage. And I'll say, by extension, tzroros is any force generated by the body of the animal while engaged in activities of normal daily living. Here's the shaila. Let's say an animal kicks a pebble. In other words, intentionally, biot. Now, both say in general, biot, kicking, falls under what category? Karen. So now watch this. What happens if an animal generates tzroros, but the tzroros is generated through an act of karen? So we'll say, so now normally, what's the halacha for karen tam? What do you have to pay for karen tam? Chatzi nezek. So listen to the shaila. So do we say, if an animal damages through tzroros of karen, do we say that you pay quarter damages? In other words, there's halacha Moshe Misiyan that says tzroros is always one level below normal damages, right? So if regal is going to pay nezek shalim, tzroros is going to pay chatzi nezek. So now the shaila is, if you have a case of tzroros that falls under the umbrella of karen, and karen would normally be chatzi nezek, do we say now that if it's tzroros of karen, you pay quarter damages? Good shaila. It's a good shaila, right? It's a good shaila. So the Gemara says, "Oh, ein shinui l'tzroros l'revia nezek," or maybe not. Maybe at the end they will say tzroros is tzroros. So whether it's tzroros from regal or whether it's tzroros from karen, the halacha is going to be the same, which is chatzi nezek across the board. That's the shaila. Good. Fine. Okay, so let's see. So what's the halacha? So tifshle midrav. So we'll say, so now we're going to go on a little bit of a journey with this, as it's actually quite fascinating. Okay, fine. We'll do that on afterwards. Listen to this. Fine. Tifshle midrav. Dubai Rava. Yesha l'tzoros. So let's analyze this based on Rava. What did Rava say? Rava asked, can you become muad for tzroros or not? So Michlal, the fact that Rava asked that question, Michlal, de'in shinui. Now the fact that Rava is asking, halacha l'maaseh, can you become a muad for tzroros, indicates us, what is he asking? Can you go from chatzi nezek to nezek shalem? Which indicates us that Rava is not entertaining the possibility that what? That there's quarter damages. That doesn't even bother Ian. To which the Gemara says, Dilma, Rava imtim salomar kamar. Maybe Rava is saying the following. Imtim salomar in shinui, ye sha'ada in ha'ada. Suppose maybe what Rava is saying is like this. If you hold that there's no quarter damages by tzroros of karen, so do we say that you could become a muad or not? In other words, maybe that's what he's asking. To which the Gemara says, teku. So the Gemara says, I'm not sure. So therefore, again, I will say, this shaila of do we say quarter damages for tzroros of karen, does that apply or not? So the Gemara ends it off as a teku. So we'll say, so interestingly enough, actually, we'll go through everything. So, actually, I'm going to say this now. The way the Rambam Paskins Rabbi says as follows. Actually, let's go through all the cases, because we're going to see actually they're all interrelated. By Rav Ashi, Koach kocho l'sumchos ki kocho dami olo. So, question number one that we have outstanding is quarter damages for tzroros of karen. Does that apply or not? Or do we just say half damages across the board? Okay? Teku. Next. By Rav Ashi. Koach kocho l'sumchas, ki kocho dami olo. So isn't this interesting case? So now, Sumchas holds that tzroros is nezek shalim. Okay, what about secondary damage? What comes after secondary damage? Tertiary damage. Thank you. Tertiary damage. So watch this. Let's say the animal kicks a pebble. The pebble hits a kli, right? And a shard from that kli goes and hits another kli, right? So koach kocho. So according to Sumchos, ultimately, again, what will be the status in that situation? The Sumchos, ki kocho dami olo. Do we say that Sumchos holds nezek shalim by tzroros, secondary damage? Would also say nezek shalim by tertiary damage? Olo. Mi gamir halacho mokila bekoach kocho. Al dilma lo gamir halacha klal. Does Sumchos maybe apply the halacha Moshe Misina by tzroros to tertiary damage or not? To which the Gemara says, teku. Okay, also, outstanding question. We'll answer all of these. Outstanding question. Next. So Mishnah says, Haisa miva'etes. Now I will say, in terms of Sumchos Shaila, it's not really so relevant. Why is it not so relevant? We don't paskin like Sumchos, right? In other words, we paskin like the Rabbanon, that tzroros are chatzi nezek. So that Shaila is not really such an issue. What about the issue of quarter damages for tzroros of Keren? So the Rambam actually paskins. The Rambam says, "Ba'ata ba'aretz b'rshos hanizak v'tizet tzroros machmas habeita v'ziku sham chayiv l'shalim revia nazek shezeh shinoi ba'tazat tzroros." So it says the Rambam actually paskins that halacha l'maisa for tzroros of Keren you'll pay quarter damages. It's fascinating. So again, I just want to point out, remember, what's the difference between tzroros of Keren and tzroros of Regel? Tzroros of Regel is where the animal is just walking normally, is doing its thing, kicks up a pebble in the course of normal walking. That's chatzi nezek, halacha l'Moshe Sinai Rabbanon. The case of the Rambam about over here is the animal kicks. Kicking is Keren. The animal purposely kicks up a pebble, causes damage as a result of that. Quarter damages. It's interesting halacha, quarter damages. So already we see an interesting distinction between tzroros of Regel versus tzroros of Keren. Good. Next, the Mishnah said, not the Mishnah. Haisa miva'etes oshay tzroros menasa mitachas ragla v'shavas hakil mishalim chatzin ezek. So no, it's actually it's quotation from the Mishnah. So as I remember again, the Mishnah says, if the animal was kicking, or the animal went ahead and caused tzroros to fly up, what's the halacha? And broke kalim, you pay chatzin ezek. So asks the Gemara, Ibai lehu, heichi Kamma. How do you read the Mishnah? Haisa meva'etes ve'zika bebi'uta. So I'll say, is it two separate cases? Do we say on one hand, if the animal went ahead and kicked and caused damage, tzroros karachayu, or kicked up pebbles in the course of walking normally, what's talacha? Mishalim chatzin ezek. So Rabbi said there are two cases there. There's a case of what? There's a case of Keren tam, regular Keren, where the animal kicks something, right? That's case of Keren, and therefore has to have damages. And then case number two is a case of tzroros, and therefore again the Mishnah reflects the view of the Rabbanon, v'Rabbanani. O Dilma, or maybe the case is as follows. O Dilma, Haisa meva'etes ve'zika bebi'uta, O tzroros machmas biut mishalim chatzin nezek. The Gemara says, or maybe it's about the following case, where the animal kicked, caused damage, or caused tzroros as a result of damage, of biut, of kicking, of Keren. In that case, you pay chatzin nezek. The Gemara says, Haki orche, but if you were to perform a normal case of tzroros, i.e. through regel, mishalim nezek shalim, you pay full damages, and whose opinion is being reflected over your money? Sumchosi. So I'll say, so Shaila, how do you read the Mishnah? So Tashma Miseifa, look at the end of the Mishnah. Darsa ala kli v'shibarto, if the animal trampled on a kli and ultimately again broke the kli, v'nafal hashever al kli acher v'shavro, and then a shard from kli number one went and broke kli number two. What's talacha? Ala rishon mishalim nezek shalim. For the first kli, you pay complete damages. The ala acharon chatzi nezek. For the second kli, half damages. So we'll say, what's the logic behind that? The first kli is regel. The second kli is tzroros. So the Gemara says, V'sumchos. Now that makes sense if it's the Rabbanon. V'sumchos. Mi isli chatzi nezek. The sumchos hold of chatzi nezek by tzroros? Of course not. Dechitema rishon lahataza. V'sheni sheni lahataza. Maybe the kli, when it says rishon, rishon is the first kli damaged by the pebble, and the second kli is the kli damaged by the shard from the first kli, and therefore v'shayni le'lu sumchos bein kocho lekoach kocho, and sumchos makes a distinction between damage done by secondary force and by tertiary force. Elahad by Ravashi, koach kocho l'sumchos ki kocho dami alav ki kocho dami. But Ravashi had this exact question. According to sumchos, do we make a distinction between secondary damage and tertiary damage? Oh, no. If that's the case, tif shotle, you should be able to resolve that from the Mishnah. Delav ki kocho dami. Based on our Mishnah, you should be able to resolve that. To which the Gemara says, you're right, Ravashi, Rabbanan Mukila. According to Ravashi, we're establishing the Mishnah like the Rabbanan. And this was the question. So therefore, again, just by the way, the way to read the Mishnah is two separate cases. If an animal was walking and went ahead and kicked, right, and damaged, right, or was walking in the normal course and went ahead and kicked up a pebble and did damage, in both of those cases you pay chatzi nezek. Now, you're paying chatzi nezek, the damages are the same, but they're for two different reasons, right? In the case of the animal kicks and does damage, you're going to pay chatzi nezek. Why? Why? Because it's keren, right? In the case of tzroros, you're going to pay chatzi nezek. Why? Because it's tzroros like the Rabbanan. So interesting, same obligation of payment, but for two different reasons. That's how you read the Mishnah. Fine. Now the Gemara says as follows. So the Gemara says, Ravashi kirabana mukule ubayle hachi. But Ravashi posed the following question: Haisa miva'etes v'zika bebiuta o tzroros karchayu chatzi nezek. So Rabbi says, so the way to read the Mishnah is as follows: if the animal kicked and did damage as a result of its kicking, i.e., keren, or it went ahead and it kicked up tzroros in the normal course of walking, the halacha is chatzi nezek. Now here's what's interesting. Ha machmas biot. Now we're going back to the previous question. What about if the animal kicked up tzroros as a result of kicking? Now, again, a little anticlimactic, as I gave you the answer already. But again, so now, according to Rav, what the Gemara is asking is like this. What happens? So I understand the classic case of tzroros is tzroros as a result of regel. What happens if you have tzroros as a result of keren? The animal purposely kicks up pebbles. So what's the halacha? We'll say first wide line. Revia nezek v'yesh shinui. So do we say that maybe in that case of tzroros as a result of keren, you pay quarter damages? Quarter damages. O dilma. Or maybe not. Maybe Rabbi say tzroros. It doesn't make a difference if it's tzroros as a result of regel, tzroros as a result of keren. Tzroros is always going to be chatzi nezek. To which the Gemara says teku. Again, I will say the Gemara leaves unresolved. Now I just want to point out, how does the Rambam paskin on a teku case? In other words, the Gemara is asking this very question. Everyone will agree, right? When I say everyone will agree, bottom line halacha we pass like the Rabbanan. Therefore, again, tzroros that comes as a result of regel is going to be chatzi nezek. We've already established that. The shaila is tzroros as a result of keren. Animal purposely kicks a pebble. That's keren, because biot is keren. That's keren. Now the pebble damages. So now the shaila is that tzroros chatzi nezek? Or maybe again, that's kind of tzroros in keren. Since keren tam normally pays chatzi nezek, maybe tzroros of keren tam will only pay quarter damages. So the Gemara leaves it as a teku. The Rambam paskins, you pay quarter damages. So we'll say, how does the Rambam paskin on a teku? So it's very simple. All the Rambam is doing, we'll say, in other words, here's what's clear. When you damage, what do you definitely have to do? When you damage someone, you definitely have to what? You have to pay something, right? So essentially what the Rambam is doing is, in a case of an unresolved halacha, he'll take the lowest common denominator. In other words, everyone is going to say, you're chayiv what? at least quarter damages. The shaila is, are you chayiv more? So the Rambam, the halacha can't make you chayiv more because the Gemara ends off with the teiku. So you can't be chayiv more. So at least what the Rambam is going to do is, the Rambam is locking in minimum liability. Minimum liability. So that's all that's happening over here. Fascinating. Okay, let's go back there. We'll say second Y line. Boy mine Rabbi Abba bar Mamel, mine Rabbi Ami, the Amri Rabbi Chia bar Abba. Haisem mahalachas b'makom she'ef shala. So we'll say, watch this. Let's say an animal was walking in a very constricted area. Very constricted area. Now Rashi says over here, we'll say, if you take a look, actually Rashi is right literally exactly across. Haisem mahalachas, Rashi says, b'chatzar hanizak. So we'll say, so we're talking about a case where the animal is walking in the property of the damaged party. Right? So Ruvain's shar is walking in Shimon's property, okay. And what happens? B'chatzar hanizak malei tzoros. The afshar shalote minaso. So here's the case. Haisam alechas b'makom she'i afshar la ela imkin minatezas. So we'll say, so now watch this. The animal is walking in an area where it's impossible for it not to kick up pebbles. So we'll say just a simple case. The animal is walking on gravel. Right, on gravel. So just the way, remember again, we'll say an animal often shuffles in some way, which means if an animal is walking on gravel, so again, Ruvain's ox is walking in Shimon's property, Chatzar Nizak, and why it's setting it up this way. But say, remember again, it's setting up this way because remember, regel in general is only chayiv b'chatzar hanizak, is only chayiv in the damaged properties, that in the damaged party's property. Right, again, I will say, I should just frame this for just a second. If an animal does regel damage in Rishus Harabim, the animal's not chayiv. Why? Because remember again, in Rishus Harabim, everyone has a right to be there. And again, as long as the animal is not acting in a meshunadik way, in a abnormal, thank you, I'm sorry, not fully good. In an abnormal way, again, there's no chiyuv. That's why again, if an animal does keren damage in Rishus Harabim, the owner of the animal, the damager is chayiv in that case. So we'll say, actually, interesting case over here. So now Ruvain's shar is in Shimon's property, walking on a gravel pathway, which means there is no choice but for the animal to go ahead and do damage, right? So what's the halacha? Uba'ata, now, okay, so now to make things more complicated, uba'ata ve'tiza, now the animal kicked is what? Karen. So the animal did an act of Karen, ve'tiza ve'zika. And now ultimately, again, a pebble was kicked up, ultimately again, and did damage. So we'll say, what do you do in this case? Mahu. Do we say, Kevan di afsharla archehu? Do we say that since at the end of the day, we'll say there was no choice for the animal but to kick up a pebble? So we'll say, the fact that the animal purposely kicked almost doesn't even make a difference. There was going to be a pebble flying regardless. And therefore, again, I will say, so therefore, again, this is just a case of regel. We look at it as a case of regular tzoros. O dilma, hashta miha machmas biut kamatzinat tzoros. Or do we say no? At the end of the day, the way the pebble got kicked up was how? Was through Keren. And then we'll say, now, what is the Gemara asking? Well, so what the Gemara is asking is, do we say that this is a case of half damages or quarter damages? That's really the shaila. Is this a case, if you hold that Sroros of Keren only pays quarter damages, how do you look at this case? So do we say that since a pebble was going to get kicked up no matter what, we don't really care how the animal kicked it up, we know that a pebble was going to go flying, therefore this is a case of Sroros, and therefore Chatzin Ezek. Or maybe not. Maybe at the end of the day, since the animal purposely kicked, therefore halacha l'maisa, this is a case of what? Tzroros of Karen, and therefore maybe at least according to one opinion, you should be able to only pay, or you should only be chayiv to pay quarter damages. To which the Gemara answers, Teku. We're not sure what to do with this case. Good, let's go back there. Says the Gemara, say, by the way, once again, what are you going to do with it? We know what is going to be the halacha in any Teku case. What is going to be the halacha in any Teku case? Minimum damages, right? Because again, that's all everybody agrees on. So that's how the Rambam paskins in this case as well. Minimum damages, quarter damages in this case. Next, interesting case. V'tiza v'zika. So actually, I'll say it's a machlokas whether or not to keep in this uba'ata or not. So the Gemara seems to have it, Rashi seems to have it. So right, the animal was walking in Rosh Hashanah, okay, and it kicked up pebbles v'zika, and ultimately again and it caused damage. So we'll say what's the halacha? Mahu. By the way, look at Rashi for just a moment. Hitizer b'shus harabim ki archei v'halchu tzros b'shus hanizak v'shabru kelim. So we'll say this is actually an interesting case over here. Actually, no, sorry, that's too early. They're not up to that yet. So watch this. So the animal went ahead and the animal was walking in Shurabim, ba'ata, kek, ve'etiza ve'zika. Mao, the karen medamina, do we compare this to a case of karen? Ve'chayeves, and therefore again the owner is chayiv. O dilma told the regel hu uptura. Or perhaps this is regel, and ultimately again we're pater. Amrale mistabra told the regel hu. Ultimately again we will count it like a case of regel, and therefore halacha l'maisa will be chayiv. Hitiza b'shus harabim ve'zika. I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry, thank you, Potter, thank you. Mistabra told the regal who Potter, right? Ultimately, again, yes, it'll be like a told the thank you. It'll be like the told of regal, and therefore Potter in Rosh Hashanah, thank you. Hitiza b'Rosh Hashanah, v'zika b'Rosh Hashanah. What happens if the animal kicks up? Now here's an interesting case. What happens if the animal kicks up a pebble in Rosh Hashanah, and ultimately, again, it goes and it damages in Rosh Hashanah, right? So we'll say, so what's the halacha now? Look at Rashi just in a moment. Rashi says, the animal is doing its own thing, so it's a case of regal. So the animal kicks up a pebble in Rosh Hashanah, and what happens? And now the pebble flies into Rosh Hashanah and does damage there. What's the halacha? Now? Amrle, so he said, Akira ein kan, hanacha yesh kan. Hanacha yesh kan. So he's an interesting answer. He says, look, obviously you're going to be pater. Why are you pater, Bose? See, if, in other words, essentially, tzuros is looked at as one cohesive act. And in tzuros, there's an akira, an uprooting of the item, and what? A landing of the item. We'll say, what is this reminiscent of? Hilchos Shabbos. Hilchos Shabbos, in order to be chayiv for an act of transferring an item, you need both an akira, a lifting up, and a placing down. What the Gemara essentially says about say, so interesting enough, what the Gemara is suggesting over here is that halacha l'maisa, you shouldn't be chayiv for a pebble that is dislodged in Rishus Harabim and lands in Rishus Hanizak. Rishus HaNizak. Why? Because since the pebble was dislodged in a place where ultimately, again, there is no liability, even if it lands somewhere where there is liability, there shouldn't be liability. Akira, he said, literally translated, it's read as an interrogative. Akira inkan, hanocha yeshkan. If there's no akira, there shouldn't be a hanocha. So the kasha. So I'll say. So again, just want to point out, just to illustrate what's happening over here. In general, there is no chiyuv for regel done in Rishus Harabim, but there is chiyuv for regel done in Rishus Hayachid. Right? That's who bir b'stei acher. So the shaila over here is the animal kicked up the pebble in Rishus Harabim and it landed and did damage in Rishus Hayachid. That's the shaila. So the Gemara wants to suggest the initial answer is no chiyuv. No chiyuv. I think Gemara says Eisvei Areza Kasha Haisa Malachas Bederach Betiza. So the animal is walking on its way and it kicks up a pebble. Bein b'rishus harabim chayiv. You're chayiv. So my love etiza b'rishus harabim zika b'rishus yachid. Are we not talking about a case where the animal kicks up the pebble in the public domain and it lands in rishus yachid? No, that's not the case. Lo etiza b'rishus harabim zika b'rishus yachid. The case ultimately again is where the animal kicked up the pebble in rishus harabim and it landed in rishus yachid. So we'll say, and what's the halacha? And what's the halacha? You're chayiv. You're chayiv. So Gemara says, 1 second, you're chayiv. Ba'amrit akira ein kan hanacha yeshkan. But we said before that you're not chayiv for that. Since the pebble was dislodged in the area where there is no liability, you're not chayiv for where the pebble ultimately lands. So he responded, Hajibi, I changed my mind. Originally I said, Akira in kan hanacha yeshkan, that ultimately there is no liability, and I changed my mind, there is liability. So therefore, the Gemara suggesting over here is that halacha l'maisa for a pebble kicked up in Rosh Hashanah and it lands in Rosh Hashanah and does damage in Rosh Hashanah, there will be liability. There will be liability. I changed my mind. Ace of the Gemara is the kasha. Darsa ala kli. If the animal tramples on a utensil, vishabarto, and he smashes it, the nafal shavra akli achav vishabro, and now a shard from kli 1 goes and breaks kli 2. What's the halacha? Ala rishon mishalim nezek shalim. For the first kli, you have to pay complete damages. Ala achron mishalim chatzi nezek, and for kli number 2, we only pay half damages. I have a Tanya law, and we said about this. I will say again, what was the logic behind that case? Kli 1 is what? Kli 1 is what? Regel. Kli 2 is Soros. The Tanya Allah, and we said about this. When is that so? Bershus Hanizak. That wasn't. I remember again. For regel in general, for regel, and for Soros, you're only chayiv in Rishus Hanizak, in a damaged party's property. Aval Bershus Harabim, but ultimately again for Rishus Harabim, if the damage occurs in Rishus Harabim, ala Rishon Ptura, on the first kli, i.e. on the regel kli, you're going to be pater, because regel is pater in Rishus Harabim. The ala Acharon Chayeves, but for Tzroros, he will be chayiv. The Gemara says, now what's the case at Soros? My love, are not talking about a case where, again, the animal kicked right, the Soros generated in Rosh Hashanah, and it did damage in Rosh Hashanah. So you see from here that you're chayiv for Soros in Rosh Hashanah. No, that's not the case. Hitiza b'Rosh Hashanah, bezika b'Rosh Hayachid. No, the case is where the animal kicked up the Soros in Rosh Hashanah, but what? It landed in Rosh Hayachid. But 1 second, you said before, Va'amrit Akira Ein Kananach. But you said before, there's not liability for a case of throws that is generated in Rosh Hashanah and lands in Rosh Hashanah. Amrullah said to him, Hadri bi, I changed my mind. So I will say, what it sounds like the Gemara is saying over here, something very interesting, which is that Allah, first of all, again, I will say some important facts. No liability for regel caused in Rishus Harabim. Right, that's an important fact. Only in Rosh Hashanah. What about Tzroros that is generated? So say and Mipashtos, Tzroros is a derivative of regel, which would also mean no chiyuv for Tzroros in Rosh Hashanah as well. What about Tzroros that originates in Rosh Hashanah but lands in Rosh Hashanah and causes damage there? It sounds like based on what the Gemara is saying now, that what's the halacha? Liability for that. So the Gemara says, "Ini, is that so?" Amud Beis, from Rabbi Yochanan. But Rabbi Yochanan said, "Ein chatzi nezek chaluk lo l'Rosh Hashanah lo Rosh Hashanah." I will say, but Rabbi Yochanan said that there is no distinction for chatzi nezek, for Rosh Hashanah or for Rosh Hashanah. I will say, now what is that talking about? So my love, hitiza b'Rosh Harabim, ve'zika b'Rosh Hayachid. Are we not talking about ultimately a case of where once again the pebble was kicked up in Rosh Hashanah and landed in my love, hitiza b'Rosh Harabim, ve'zika b'Rosh Harabim. Are not talking about a case where again Tzroros is generated in Rosh Hashanah and does damage to Rosh Hashanah. Lo, hitiza b'Rosh Harabim, ve'zika b'Rosh Hayachid. Talking about a case where the pebble was kicked up in Rosh Hashanah, lands and does damage in Rosh Hashanah. Aiva amrit. Akira Inkan Hanacha Yeshkan. But you said before that there's no liability. Amrle Hadribi. Say I changed my mind. But say tremendous Mr. Haskell. You can change your mind in life. I will say sometimes we get so set in our ways, right? So set in our ways. And sometimes again, we become so rigid in the way we approach things. And even when we see that our hashkafas, our outlooks are flawed, and even when we see that our ideologies are outdated, and the life stances that we have, maybe worked once upon a time but don't work now, sometimes we become so rigid that we refuse to change, we refuse to evolve. And I will say two words, Hajibi, change my mind. We'll say sometimes being rigid and fixed in certain things and certain mindsets and certain ideologies and certain ashkafas is good, and sometimes I will say it is the worst thing in the world. The person has to learn the art of change, the art of evolution, the ability to progress. Two simple words I will say could unlock the most dramatic potential. Hadribi. I recognize that maybe the way that I thought and the way that I acted and even some of my hashkafas of my youth or of prior years worked then, don't work now. I need to evolve. Hadribi is the key to unlocking personalistic change. Incredible. The other possibility is Kim Rabbi Yochanan, a Karen. When Rabbi Yochanan ultimately again made his statement, it was ultimately regarding Karen. regarding Karen. So Rabbi will say, so again, obviously, look at Rashi just a moment. Kikam Rabbi Yochanan, Ein Chatzi Nezek Chaluk, when Rabbi Yochanan made his statement that there is no distinction ultimately again between Chatzi Nezek, whether it's in Rosh Hashanah, Rosh Hashanah, Rabbi will say, this whole time we're assuming he's referring to Tzroros, right? Maybe not. Maybe he's referring to Karen. And I will say then the statement makes perfect sense. Karen, I will say, is one of the forms of damage that applies where? Applies where? Everywhere. It applies in Rosh Hashanah. It applies in Rosh Hashanah, right? Karen there is always liability for Karen. Maybe that's what Rabbi Yochanan was saying, that halacha l'maisa, there is no distinction. Okay, fascinating. Yasser Rabbi Yehuda Nisia, Rabbi Yoshi Akil, Rabbi Yehuda. So I will say, Rabbi Yehuda, Nisia, and Rabbi Yoshi were sitting on the porch of Rabbi Yehuda. I will say, by the way, doesn't that seem like such a beautiful sight? Right? They're just sitting on the porch together. They're just sitting on the porch together. So I will say, now here's what's incredible. The incredible thing is to think about when you're sitting on the porch with a bunch of your friends. What are you talking about, right? In other words, what am I doing when I'm going ahead? When I'm going ahead and. Right, you're thinking porch, it's the John Adams porch rocker, right? I'm sitting there having a beer with my friends, right? So, okay, which is beautiful to have a beer with your friends. What are you talking about? What are you talking about when you're hanging around with your chaverim? So they must say, it's so beautiful. Nafik milsa mibinayu. So what were they talking about? They were talking Torah. Tzroros, right? Tzroros, right? What else are you going to talk about, right? So it actually is beautiful. What it tells you is having time with your friends, right? Having a good peer group, a good social circle is such a beautiful bracha. I'll say, but again, what you talk about with your friends really determines the quality of that friendship. So here they talk about nafik milsa mibinayu. So the following question: Kishkishab is nava mau. So we'll say, what happens if the animal does damage with its tail? The tail is wagging around. What's the halacha? So mau amar leidach. So again, v'chiyach zena biznava. Again, so as I say, just to be clear, the animal's tail wagging around is normal. So the shaila is if the animal does damage just with the tail wagging around, what's going to be the halacha? So in other words, is that really, I should say differently. Really, what they're asking is that normal? Therefore, we call that regel, and therefore, if it's normal, if the animal did damage with its wagging tail in Shram, you'll be pater. So the Gemara says, so again, what is the person supposed to do? Hold on to the tail of the animal while he's leading the animal? Of course not. And therefore, it's normative damage, and therefore, there's no chiyuv. So you can say something about Karen. Is the owner obligated to hold on to the horns of his animal to prevent it from goring someone else? To which the Gemara says, no. Karen lav orchehu. Karen, I will say, is considered to be an abnormal act. Ha orche. The animal wagging its tail is normal. So if it's normal, what are we asking? In other words, say. So if it's normal, then if it does do damage with its wagging tail, then what? Then so that's regel. And if it's regel, you're not chayiv in Rosh Hashanah. If that's the case, what's the shaila? Kishkush yisera mibayle. The animal is a very avid tail wagger, right? In other words, apparently, again, normally animal has 25 wags a minute, right? And this animal, Baruch Hashem, this animal has always been an overachiever, right? So he's up to 36 wags a minute. So kishkush yisera is your liability for that. And that was the shaila. And I will say, bepashtos there's not. Bepashtos wagging is wagging, and therefore again that's considered to be a normative activity of animal behavior, and therefore again halacha l'maisa, no liability in Rosh Hashanah. It's called regel. Next, by the Rava, interesting case here. Kishkisha ba'amsa. Let's say again a male animal, right? And the male member of the animal's male member is wagging around. So and it does damage like that. Mahu. Midi the haba Karen. So I say, do we say it's like Karen? It's like Karen. So Karen lab yitzra katakev. So I will say about Karen, ultimately again, there's no yitzer that took hold of it. Hacha nami loshna. O Dilma, Karen Kavanos Lahazik, or maybe Karen will say the intention is to do damage. Ha'im Kavanos Lahazik. Here will say there's no Kavana to be mazik, to which the Gemara says, Teku. Okay, so this one is going to be left unresolved. Fine. Hatar Golden Mu'adin Lahalik Kidakran Lashabra. So I'll say the next case in the Mishnah was chickens are muad to go ahead and do damage in a normal way. Now, I just want to point out over here what the Mishnah spoke about, right? So the Mishnah actually made, what was the Mishnah? First good. So I'll say, so the way the Mishnah read was as follows. Tarnagolim udal halik kidakron l'shaber. Right, a chicken does damage. Right, it's in other words, it's muad to go ahead and to dakar, which regel. So if a chicken goes ahead and does damage through hopping around, running around, right, all that, right, hits something with its wings, that's normal. Hayad delil kasha baraglav. What happens if there was a string tied onto the leg of the chicken? Oshayim mahadis u'mishabras hakelim mishalim chatzin nezek. So therefore, I will say with the string, if the animal does damage with the string, you pay half damages. Half damages. Okay. So I was going to ask the Gemara the following shayla. Amravuna, lo shana ala shenikshar me'elav. That's talking about a case about say where halacha l'maisa, the string kind of got attached to the leg of the animal by itself. Then there'd be chatzin nezek, because that'd be like tzroros. So the Gemara says, aval kashru adam chayiv. If someone tied the string on the leg of the animal, ultimately again, then the person is chayiv. So the Gemara says, then there's chayiv. Good. Look at Rashi just a moment. Avakashu adam chayiv hakosher nezek shalim to have a bar. The miskaba adam chayiv niska. So what's interesting? If a person tied the string on the leg of the chicken, then ultimately the tire is going to be chayiv. Why? Interestingly enough, it's bar. Fascinating, right? It's a case of bar. You're creating an obstacle ultimately again in Rosh Hashanah. So the Gemara says, Avakachu Adam Chayiv, Nikshar Me'elav Man Chayiv. So we'll say, in the case of where the string attaches itself to the leg of the chicken, so the Mishnah said is Chayiv Chatzi Nezek. Who's Chayiv? Who's chayiv? Man chayiv. Ilema bal hadalil. If you're saying that the owner of the string is chayiv, so hechidami, what's the case? Ida atzne. If the owner of the string put the string away, he hid it away, then and the chicken somehow got into it, anasu. I will say that's an extenuating circumstance. Why should he be chayiv for that? V'lo atzne. And if he didn't hide away the string, posheyahu. Einachinami, he's negligent. He's a posheya. Ela chayiv bal tarnagol. Rather, I will say what it's saying is like this: the owner of the chicken is chayiv chatzines. In other words, if no one tied the string onto the leg of the chicken, and the chicken somehow again got itself snared in the string, and then the string does damage, the owner of the chicken is going to be chayiv chatzin nezek. So the Gemara says, "Ma'ishna kuli nezek delo." So we'll say, so why is it now? I want to point out the string itself. The Gemara's understanding when it does damage, that damage is called bar. Is called bar. It's not really tzroros, so we'll say, why isn't it tzroros? Because the string itself is attached to the body of the animal. So it's going to be called bar. So we'll say, so therefore, again, halacha l'maisa, in a case where the chicken got itself caught up in the string, ultimately, again, the owner of the chicken will be chayiv chatzi nezek. So Gemara says, ma'ishnei kulei nezek delo. Why won't you be chayiv for full damages? The chsev ki yiftach ish bar v'lo shar bar. Because we'll say, the way ultimately, again, the pasuk says, if a man will uncover a pit, so it means like an inanimate object is a pit, but the animal doesn't become a bar. Chatzi nezek nami, ish bar v'lo shabar, so it should be even chayiv half damages. In other words, again, an animal is not a bar. If an animal is not a bar, right, then ultimately, again, why should I be chayiv even half damages? Ella, watch this, masnisin beda'adye aduye. Rather, I will say, what's the case? Look at Rashi just a moment. Ela masnisin lo mutukma ela ba'adye aduye shezara katana gol adalil v'shibher bizrikaso kalib davut soros. I will say, what's the case? The case where the chicken flung the string. Right? It flung the string, it threw the string. The Gemara says, and therefore, what is it a case? It's a case ultimately, again, of sroros. B'chi itmar de Rav Huna ba'alma itmar. And Rav Huna's statement is in the general statement. Delil hefker, so the Gemara says, Delil hefker, Rav Huna, nikshar me'elav, pater. So ultimately, again, if you have an ownerless string, so I'll say if the chicken goes ahead and gets caught up in a mat pater, kashru adam chayiv. So the Gemara says mishum mai chayiv. Rav Huna bar Manuach mishum boro hamiskalgel baragle adam ubaragle behema. Ultimately, so we'll say see something interesting over here. Halacha l'maisa. So halacha l'maisa. If the animal gets caught up in the string and the string does damage, ultimately, we'll say that is the case of bar. That is a case of bar. And we're going to discuss this further. There's a case of bar hamiskalgel baragle adam baragle behema. A bar ultimately, again, that is moved because of people, so you could have a mobile bar and there is liability for that. If the chicken goes in and throws the string, then I will say that won't be a case of bar. Rather, what will that be? That'll be ultimately, again, a case of tzra. So those will stop over here for today. Apologies for doing the last piece a little bit more quickly. Start at the Mishnah tomorrow. Shkoyach. Okay, Chevron Zoom, have a great day, everyone.